Good morning, nerds, and welcome to the first installment of my new series on just Unity basics. Mostly the series is going to focus on gameplay, but for this first installment, um, one of the things I get asked by newbies is how do you even just get a sprite in the game? And that is, frankly, ridiculously easy, so we're going to walk through that. I'm going to show you how to set up a basic scene for, we're going to be building a Pong game over the course of this series, and probably some other games too, but Pong first. And so what we're going to do is we're going to start off with just a couple sprites here. I made these in Piskel. They are just PNGs. One of them is quite large. I think the wall is something in the neighborhood of 128 by 16, and the paddle is somewhere in the neighborhood of 8 by 16, or 8 by 32, if I remember right. But anyways, they're both just basic pixel art. You can do this in MS Paint if you're on a PC. Mac doesn't come built in with any drawing programs, and rather than install Photoshop, I just went for piskel.com, which I think I have open up in another tab here. Let me see if I can find it. Oh, there we go. Hey, look at that. Piskel, it's piskelapp.com. So shout out to those guys. This is a pretty cool online sprite editor. You can also do some cool things like animated windows or animated sprites and things like that. Which I did use for other parts of my tutorial series. Let's see here. Let's pull this back out again. Go back into Unity. So what I've got here is I've got a brand new 2D project that I've just started, and for this entire tutorial series, I'm going to be using Unity 2021.1. 0.13F1 if that matters, but really everything I'm doing in here has worked as far as I've been using Unity, which is around Unity 5.5 before they even started doing the year version numbers. And it would still work on the newer versions like 2022. So the Unity version on this doesn't really matter. I'm going to be using Visual Studio Community 2019 for my text editing purposes or code editing purposes. I would strongly recommend Visual Studio, mostly just because of the IntelliSense, but really any text editor, including just popping out Notepad++, would totally work for this. So for my for what we're going to be doing this time, this session is really easy. We're just going to be importing some sprites. So I've got my two sprites that I've created here. These are both PNGs that I've downloaded. I would definitely recommend. PNG is probably the best format to use with Unity. There are other things that will work, but it's nice, clean, it supports transparency, it's pretty great, and it's relatively low overhead, so PNG is a pretty good way to go. I've had problems in the past using JPEG and GIF, but PNG seems to be pretty great. So all I'm going to do here is, all you really need to do is drag it into your project window, into your assets, and it should take, I don't know why it didn't that time. Let me try that again. Maybe I need to do these one at a time. Okay, Unity just did not like it when I tried to do two at once. I think that's a Mac thing. I'm not really sure. But I can drag them both in there, and look at that. They're both there. If I click on one in the inspector, it should show Sprite 2D and UI. There's a few things in here that we want to do as a standard. And rather than do it multiple times here, I also want to show one of my other favorite tricks, which is if you're on PC, you can control click. If you're on Mac, you would do the command click. And you'll notice that I've highlighted both of my sprites here. So if I just click on one and then command click, I can click on the other one. And so I can edit, and you'll see two texture 2Ds imports. That's because there's two different textures I'm editing at the same time. In Unity, all graphics files are just kind of assumed to be textures because of its 3D nature. But we can look at this. Texture type is going to definitely want to be 2D and UI sprites because we're going to be doing 2D work. Sprite mode, single is great for this. If I was doing an animated sprite sheet, I would definitely use multi, but for this, single is great. Pixels per unit, I kind of vary between 100 or 72 depending on what I'm working on. 72 tends to be the like pixel perfect on the screen kind of thing, but 100 works for most stuff. Uh, Mesh type. This one's important. Generally speaking, unless you're using some of the more advanced features with Unity, a lot of calculations get run on the image's mesh, and this is a really inefficient process and it can add up over time. So one of your quick optimization strategies that you should do with every sprite, unless you know what you're doing and you want to do more advanced things, is switch this to full rectangle, get rid of the extrude edges, and uncheck generate physics shape. What that's going to do is that's going to force, or that's going to turn off a lot of the built-in systems that you really don't need, and they're just going to decrease your performance. So that's kind of a quick performance enhancer right there. The rest of this stuff we can kind of just leave alone. I'll kind of adjust these as I go when needed, but the defaults are usually pretty good. And I'm going to go ahead and click apply. The other thing I'm going to do here, and this is a great habit to be in, is you do not want to just lay everything in your assets folder. This is going to be a giant mess later to have to clean up. We should be building good habits. So the other thing I'm going to do here is going to create, and I'm going to create a new folder. I'm going to call this guy Sprites. And we're just going to drag both of these sprites in. And if we go into our sprites folder, which we can access over here on the left, you can see both of my sprites. And they're ready to go. Now, to add them into my game is so ridiculously easy. All I've got to do is click and drag, and it's there. You can see it. If I click on paddle, it's definitely there. Now, my main problem here, as you can see, with this pixel resolution, I have made this really tiny. And there's some ways to make this better, but really the way I'm going to do it this time, you can mess with some things in the sprite properties, but really I'm just going to adjust the scale. And I'm just going to adjust this. When I was playing with this earlier, I found that 5 felt pretty good to me. And so if I just scale everything over by 5s, this starts to feel pretty good. And I'm just going to drag this over here because, again, I want to ultimately make a Pong game. I'm going to drag it kind of in the center, kind of over on the left. And if we look over here, we can see in our transform over here on the right, I like to try to keep my numbers clean and add some precision to this. So negative 9.04 is pretty close to just saying it's negative 9. And then instead of 013 and the negative, I'm just going to put that at 0. And we're going to call that good. So this is a pretty good spot for this. For the wall, I'm going to drag that in. Again, I'm just going to drag straight into my, I can drag it onto the field here. I can drag it onto the hierarchy. Either way works. This time I'm just going to drag it into the field. And as with the paddle, it is a lot smaller than I intended. I am going to take this opportunity, though, to do some centering and some positioning. So I'm going to set my X position to 0, and my Y, let's go negative 4. Let's see what happens with negative 5. 5's too low. I don't want it going, you can see this boundary here. This is where the game boundary is going to be if I hit play. This is a little too low. It's going to kick me off the boundary here. So maybe let's try 4.5 because I want it pretty close to that edge, but I don't quite want it on the edge. And I am going to scale it up, so this will be getting me a little closer. And like I did before, this one I didn't play with ahead of time, so I'm going to just kind of experiment. 5 by 5 is, I like the height, but I'm not too thrilled with the width. So I'm going to just bump that up to 10, still a little low. Let's go 15, which is fine for this demo, but I do want to call out that we're starting to see, especially on the edges here, we're starting to see the fact that because I've scaled it wider than I did tall, we're starting to see a little bit more bleed on the left and right than we are on the top and bottom. That's fine for this, but really what I should have done is measured off my map before I started, and then made a sprite that actually fits correctly. But this is going to be good enough for what I'm doing. So I'm not going to worry about it too much. If I want to get into game art, I might do some tutorials on game art later, but not today. Now, the other cool thing I'm going to do here, my pro tip is I could repeat this exact same process. Don't follow along with me on this because I'm going to just delete it. But I could go up here, set the wall, do the same kind of adjustments that I just did. Go through that entire process over again, but that's kind of silly, so I'm just going to delete this. So if you followed along with me, just go ahead and delete. Sorry, I'm not using a normal Mac keyboard here, so my keyboard shortcuts are a little weird. Anyways, what I'm going to do instead, this is basically set correctly. The only difference is my y-axis, I'm going to want the second wall to be at y 4.5 instead of negative 4.5. Everything else I want to do the same. So what I'm going to do here is instead, I'm going to duplicate this wall, which I can do a lot of different ways. I can right click and say duplicate. I could go up to the edit menu and say, nope, I have to go, no, that was the edit menu. Edit duplicate. But I personally like key codes, so again, I'm going to use Control D on Windows or Command D on Mac, and just duplicate that wall out. And my duplicate is, I'm going to set that to positive 4.5 for my Y, and you're going to notice it just moves into the correct spot. And the other thing I should do here is I'm going to start getting into a little bit of lightweight naming convention. Again, as we add more objects, this is going to start getting confusing. So I'm going to change my paddle to left paddle. I'm going to change my wall. That's the bottom wall. I'm going to make this, so I'm going to say bottom wall. And my other wall is going to be my top wall. And at this point, I've input my sprites correctly. The last thing I'm going to want to do for later is I'm going to want to be able to do collision with these guys. So I'm going to add a box collider, and since we're doing 2D mode, I'm going to add a box collider 2D to all these things. And again, I just want to be fast. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to highlight all of this stuff. And if you're highlighting a lot of things at once that are all in a line like these guys are, you can do shift, don't hit anything. Click on the first one, hold down the shift key, click on the last one, and you're going to highlight everything in between. This trick actually works in a lot of software. I use it in Microsoft Word all the time. But this is going to highlight all my stuff, and you're going to see over here, it's got a dash because so many things are selected and a couple other things are selected. And the way we add things, add abilities to objects in Unity is we add components. And the component that I want to add this time is called a box collider. And if I start typing in, I can find it here. I actually don't even remember where it is because I never do it this way. I think it's under physics. Oh yeah, there it is. Okay, I could go into physics and find it. So if you want to click through the menus, you can, but if you know what you're looking for, and I do this time, you can just start typing it in. So I know that I want a box collider. So I'm going to start typing it in, and it shows me everything. Well, certainly I don't want a skybox. Do I want box collider, or do I want box collider 2D? And since this is a 2D project, we're going to stay in 2D the whole time. I am not going to use the regular box collider. I'm going to use the 2D box collider. And by clicking on that, what you can see here is you can see this faint green line that has appeared over all three of my objects. And if I click on any of them, you can see that there is a box collider. And by default, it's wrapped itself around the edges of the around the sprite's perimeter, around the rectangle of the perimeter. So I don't really need to do any work here to make this all work. It's in pretty good shape. And that's going to benefit me later for the next unit when we do movement. So I think this is a pretty good stopping point. What we've learned today is how to get a sprite on the screen. We've learned how to do a little bit of resizing, and we've learned a little bit about organization and how to add components. I hope that was helpful for you. And if you're liking this, please like and subscribe, and then watch the rest of the tutorials in this series. And as always, when we close, I just want to call out, just, keep on creating. All right, have a great day, everybody.